She was hired as a secretary and believed it would be just another job. But when she crossed paths with that man, she felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment saying where you're listening from. Amber Collins woke up before her alarm went off, as she had done since she was 17. The two-room apartment in Riverside still held the scent of lavender and incense that her grandmother burned every morning, even 3 years after her death. She got up slowly, her bare feet touching the cold floor, and walked to the window. Chicago was waking up below, but Amber felt as if she was still dreaming. In that dream, always the same, she ran through a dense forest where the trees had golden eyes and whispered her name. She would wake up sweating, her heart racing, and with a strange feeling of longing for something she had never experienced. Grandma Betty used to say that dreams were the devil's traps, especially for women like them, who carried in their blood the curse of dangerous beauty. Amber looked at herself in the bathroom mirror, brown hair always tied in a severe bun, fair, skin without a drop of makeup, loose clothes that hid the curves that insisted on existing despite all her efforts. At 26, she had become an expert in being invisible. It was her way of surviving in a world where women like her mother disappeared without a trace. Fiona Collins had vanished when Amber was only 6 years old. Officially, she had abandoned her family to follow a rich man. But Amber grew up hearing the whispers of the neighborhood, the conversations that stopped when she entered the room, the looks of pity mixed with fear. Her mother hadn't just left, she had been taken. And Grandma Betty made sure her granddaughter never followed the same path. The bus to downtown was crowded as always. Amber squeezed between the passengers, trying to go unnoticed, when her phone vibrated. It was a message from the employment agency. "Congratulations, you've been selected for the position of personal secretary at Blackwood Holdings. Please report today at 9 a.m. at 1472 Michigan Avenue, 28th floor." Amber's heart raced. She had applied for dozens of positions in the last few weeks, but this one in particular intrigued her. Blackwood Holdings was a mysterious company, specializing in agribusiness and environmental projects, headquartered in one of the most imposing towers on Michigan Avenue. During the phone interview, the male voice that had questioned her seemed to know her better than it should, asking specific questions about her background, her family, even about her dreams. When she arrived at the building, Amber stood on the sidewalk for a few minutes, observing the glass and steel structure that rose like a blade against the gray sky. There was something different about this building. The exterior walls were covered with dense, dark vines that seemed to pulse slightly with the wind. The security guards at the entrance wore deep green uniforms, almost black, and there was a smell in the air that she couldn't identify, something between wet earth and spices. The elevator rose slowly, and Amber felt a strange pressure in her chest. When the doors opened on the 28th floor, she was greeted by a receptionist with brown skin and intense eyes, who smiled as if she had been waiting for her for a long time. "Amber Collins, Mr. Blackwood is waiting for you." The hallway, leading to the main office, was decorated with sculptures of animals that Amber didn't recognize. Felines with precious stone eyes, birds with beaks too curved to be real. The walls were covered with dark wood, and a low rhythmic sound echoed through the environment like a distant chant. When the door opened, Amber felt as if the world had stopped spinning. The office didn't look like an office. It was a circular environment, with large windows offering a panoramic view of the city, but the decoration reminded her more of a temple than a corporate space. There were plants everywhere, some she had never seen before, with enormous leaves and flowers of impossible colors. In the center, a massive wooden desk so dark it seemed to absorb light, and behind the desk, Ethan Blackwood. Amber had seen photos of him on the internet during her research about the company, but none had captured the intensity of his presence. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a posture that mixed elegance with something primitive. His black hair was tied up high on his head, revealing a strong neck marked by symmetrical scars that looked like tribal designs. But it was his eyes that hypnotized her, golden as honey, with a depth that made her feel as if he could see through her soul. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper, but it filled the entire room. "Amber, you've finally come." She tried to respond, to introduce herself professionally as she had rehearsed in the elevator, but the words were lost in her throat. The air in the office was heavy, charged with an energy that made her feel dizzy. The smell of wet earth she had sensed at the entrance was stronger here, mixed with something sweet and wild. I came for the interview," she managed to murmur, her hands trembling slightly. Ethan slowly stood up, circling the desk with feline movements. He didn't take his eyes off her, and Amber felt as if she were being studied, analyzed, recognized. "There's no need for an interview," he said, stopping a few feet from her. "You're already mine." The words should have sounded absurd, even offensive, but something inside Amber recognized them as truth. She felt a wave of heat rising through her body, a sensation she had never experienced before, dangerous, intoxicating, completely contrary to everything Grandma Betty had taught her. It was then that the visions began. For an instant, Amber was no longer in the office. She was in a dense forest, with her bare feet sinking into the moist earth. She could hear the sound of running water and voices singing in a language she didn't know, but that her heart understood. There was a man walking toward her, with the same golden eyes as Ethan, but wearing clothes from another time, another place. The vision lasted only seconds, but it was enough for her legs to collapse. Amber felt the world darken, the smell of earth intensifying until everything became silence. Amber awoke in a dark leather armchair, with the taste of herbs in her mouth and a strange feeling that she had been dreaming for days. The first thing she saw were Ethan Blackwood's golden eyes observing her, with a mixture of concern and fascination. He was sitting in a nearby chair, with a glass of water in his hands. "How long was I unconscious?" she asked, trying to sit up. Her voice came out hoarser than normal. 3 hours, Ethan replied, offering her the glass. "The doctor said it was just a stress-induced fainting spell, but I knew it was something more." Amber drank the water, slowly, trying to organize her thoughts. The office seemed different now, as if she were seeing it with new eyes. The plants seemed more alive, the colors more intense. And Ethan seemed more dangerous and attractive than before, if that were possible. "You said you knew it was something more," she murmured, placing the glass on the table. "What did you mean by that?" Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. When he spoke, his voice carried a seriousness that made her shiver. "Your mother used to faint here too, whenever she came for meetings with my father." Amber's world stopped again, but this time she remained conscious. "My mother, Fiona Collins. You knew her?" "Knew her all too well," said Ethan, standing up and walking to one of the shelves. He took out an old folder and returned, sitting on the edge of the desk. "Fiona worked for Blackwood Holdings for 2 years between 2001 and 2003. She was responsible for ethnobotanical mapping in the Amazon region." Amber felt the air leave her lungs. Her grandmother had always said that Fiona worked as a cleaner in downtown offices, that she had left everything for a married man who had promised to take her away. She had never mentioned environmental projects or the Amazon. "That's impossible," she whispered. "My mother barely finished high school. How could she work on something like that?" Ethan opened the folder and took out some photographs. In the eye. First one, Amber immediately recognized her mother's face, but Fiona looked different, more alive, wilder. She wore light-colored clothes and had her hair loose, ornamented with flowers that Amber didn't recognize. She was standing next to a tall man with graying hair, with the same golden eyes as Ethan. "My father, Alexander Blackwood," explained Ethan, following her gaze, "and your mother wasn't just an employee. She had a special gift for communicating with indigenous communities. It was as if she spoke an ancestral language that not even she fully understood." Amber took the photo with trembling hands. There was something in that face that she recognized, but not from the memories she had of her mother. It was something deeper, as if she were seeing herself in another time. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, returning the photo. "And what does this have to do with me being here?" Ethan put the photos away and closed the folder, but didn't take his eyes off her. "Because you're not here by chance, Amber, just as your mother wasn't. There's something in your lineage, something that our family has been looking for generations." "Our family?" Amber repeated, feeling a chill down her spine. "What kind of thing are you looking for?" For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He walked to the window, observing the city below. When he turned again, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that surprised her. Women capable of establishing genuine connections with ancestral nature. Women who can serve as a bridge between two worlds, the rational and the instinctive. Your mother had this ability, and from your dreams, from the visions you had here, you have it too. Amber stood up abruptly, feeling a mixture of anger and confusion. "You don't know anything about my dreams." "I know you've been dreaming about the forest for years," said Ethan calmly. "I know you wake up sweating, missing a place you've never been. I know you smell scents that don't exist and hear voices that aren't of this world." Ethan's words hit Amber like precise arrows. It was impossible for him to know this, but every detail was correct. She felt naked, exposed, as if he could read her most intimate thoughts. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "Because I've been dreaming of you for 5 years, admitted Ethan, approaching her again. "Since I turned 30 and took control of the company. In my dreams, you appear as a wild woman, with loose hair and eyes that shine in the dark. You call me by a name that isn't mine, in a language I don't recognize." Amber felt her whole body shiver. She had dreamed of a man like that too, someone who looked like Ethan but different, more primitive. In the dreams, she wasn't the reserved and repressed Amber of real life. She was someone powerful, sensual, dangerous. "This is crazy," she murmured, but her voice carried no conviction. "Maybe it is," agreed Ethan, stopping very close to her. Amber could feel the heat emanating from his body, a masculine perfume mixed with something wild that made her dizzy. "But you feel it, don't you? This connection between us, as if we've known each other much longer than a few minutes." Amber wanted to deny it, wanted to run out of that office and never come back. All of this contradicted everything she had learned about safety, about protecting herself, about keeping distance. But when she looked into Ethan's golden eyes, she felt something breaking inside her, a barrier she had built over years collapsing like a breached dam. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice coming out almost like a moan. "I want you to work with me," said Ethan, but there was much more than professionalism in his voice. "I want you to help me understand what our family lost when your mother disappeared. And I want—" he hesitated, running his hand through his hair. "I want to find out why I can't stop thinking about you since the dreams began." Amber knew she should refuse. She should leave and never look back. But something inside her, something that had been repressed for years, was awakening. A wild and hungry part that recognized Ethan as something she had been waiting for all her life. "I'll accept the job," she said, surprising herself. "But I want some conditions." Ethan smiled for the first time since she had woken up, and that smile completely transformed his face. He looked younger, more human, but still maintained that dangerous aura that fascinated her. "Any conditions you want," he replied, "as long as you stay." Amber's first weeks at Blackwood Holdings passed like a feverish dream. She had demanded that Ethan maintain professional distance, but quickly discovered that this was impossible, not because he was inappropriate. On the contrary, Ethan scrupulously respected the boundaries she established. The problem was that Amber felt as if she were dying of thirst in the desert, and he was the only source of water. Her apartment had become a strange place. Objects appeared in locations where she was sure she hadn't placed them. A black feather on her dresser, a smooth, dark stone on the windowsill, dried flowers that exhaled an intoxicating perfume. Amber tried to rationalize, to convince herself that she was distracted, but deep down she knew that something was changing in her reality. The dreams intensified. Now she didn't just run through the forest. She danced naked under the moonlight, with her body painted with symbols that shone like liquid gold. She woke up with the taste of wild fruits in her mouth and skin sensitive, as if it had been touched by invisible hands. It was disturbing and exciting at the same time. At the company, Ethan treated her with an almost painful formality. "Miss Collins here, Miss Collins there." always maintaining a safe distance. But Amber noticed how his eyes followed her when she walked through the room, how his breathing changed when she approached to deliver reports. The sexual tension between them was almost palpable, a thread stretched to the breaking point. It was on a rainy Thursday that everything began to clarify. Amber was organizing Ethan's personal files when she found a locked drawer at the bottom of the cabinet. Normally, she would respect privacy, but something compelled her to open it. As if her hands knew where to find the key, she went straight to the plant pot by the window and removed a small golden key hidden in the soil. Inside the drawer were dozens of photographs, old documents, and a leather-bound diary. The photos showed women from different eras, some in clothes from the last century, others more recent. They all had something in common: intense eyes and a wild beauty that seemed to emanate from within, and they were all next to men, from the Blackwood family. Amber recognized her mother in several photos, but there were others that made her pause to breathe. A woman who looked like an older version of herself, dated 1954. Another from 1923, who had exactly her eyes and her mouth. It was as if she were looking at a family album she never knew she had. The diary was written in English, but with an old-fashioned handwriting and words she didn't recognize mixed into the text. As she read, she began to understand that this wasn't an ordinary diary, but a record of rituals and ceremonies. There were detailed descriptions of medicinal plants, chants in indigenous languages, and more disturbingly, accounts of sacred unions between chosen women and men of the Blackwood lineage. "You shouldn't be looking at that." Ethan's voice made her jump. He was at the office door with the most serious face she had ever seen. Amber tried to close the diary and return everything to the drawer, but her hands were shaking. "I was organizing and found the drawer open," she lied, but she knew he wouldn't believe it. Ethan entered and closed the door behind him. He walked toward her slowly, like a predator approaching an injured prey. When he got close enough, he extended his hand. "Give me back the diary, Amber." "No," she said, surprising them both. "Not until you explain what all this means. These women, they look like me. And my mother is here in photos dating from before my birth." Ethan sighed and ran his hands through his hair. For a moment, Amber saw genuine vulnerability in his eyes. "You want the truth?" he asked. "The complete truth, even if it changes everything between us?" Amber nodded, although part of her wanted to run away. Ethan sat on the edge of the desk, too close for her comfort, but Amber didn't move away. His scent, wood, spices, and something indefinable, was making her dizzy. "The Blackwood family is not an ordinary family," he began. "Our ancestors came from Northern Europe in the 18th century, but not as common colonizers. They were, as you might say today, mystical anthropologists, scholars of ancestral traditions that were lost in modern civilization." Amber listened. In silence, the diary pressed against her chest. When they arrived in America, they made alliances with isolated indigenous communities. They learned about plants, rituals, ancient ways of connecting with nature. But there was a problem. The lineage was weakening. Blackwood men began to lose the ability to truly connect with this ancestral world. "And the women in the photos?" Amber asked, although she already suspected the answer. Women with ancient indigenous blood but raised in the modern world. Women who served as bridges between the two universes. Each generation of Blackwood men seeks their spiritual companion, someone who can awaken in them the lost connection. Amber felt a wave of nausea. "You choose women as if they were ritual objects?" "No," said Ethan firmly, standing up and moving even closer. "We don't choose. We recognize. The connection is mutual, Amber. These women also seek us out, even without knowing why." She wanted to deny him, but she couldn't. From the first day, she had felt irresistibly attracted to Ethan, as if he exerted a magnetic force on her. "And my mother? What happened to her?" Ethan's face darkened. "Fiona was my father's chosen companion. They had a daughter together, you. But when you were born, Fiona panicked. She said she didn't want her daughter to grow up destined for the same role. She ran away with you and my father. My father never recovered." Amber felt the world spinning. "Are you saying I'm your half-sister?" "No," Ethan said quickly. Alexander Blackwood wasn't your biological father. Your mother was pregnant before she met him. But you were raised as if you were his daughter. And when she fled... When she fled, what? Ethan hesitated, and Amber saw fear in his eyes. When she fled, she took something with her that she shouldn't have. A sacred necklace, a piece that had been blessed in ancestral rituals. Without it, our family's connection to the spiritual world began to deteriorate. Amber instinctively brought her hand to her neck, where there was a small scar she had never been able to explain. What kind of necklace? A gold choker with a small feather in the center. Do you remember anything like that? The memories came back like an avalanche. She vaguely remembered her mother taking something from her neck the night before she disappeared, whispering words in a strange language. She remembered crying, feeling as if something important was being torn from her. "You want me to be like these other women," said Amber, finally understanding. "You want me to be your spiritual bridge." Ethan stared at her with an intensity that made her tremble. "I want you to be mine," he said simply. "Not by ritual, not by family tradition, because since you walked into this office, I feel as if I had been asleep for 30 years and finally woke up." Amber left Ethan's office with trembling hands and a racing heart. The revelations about her family, about the purpose behind her hiring, about the mystical nature of the Blackwoods, all of this should have made her run away. But instead, she felt more alive than ever, as if a dormant part of her soul had finally awakened. That night, Amber couldn't sleep. She stood by the window of her apartment, watching the city lights, trying to process everything she had discovered. Around 3 in the morning, she decided she needed answers that only one person could give. She picked up the phone and called the only aunt she still kept in touch with. "Aunt Martha." "It's me, Amber. I need to talk to you about my mother." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Amber, what time is it? Why are you asking about Fiona now?" "I need to know the truth. About where she worked, about how she really disappeared, and I need to know about my father." Another silence, this one even heavier. Amber could hear her aunt's heavy breathing. "Come here tomorrow morning," Martha finally said. "There are things you need to know, but I can't talk over the phone." The next day, Amber headed to her aunt's apartment in Oakwood. Martha was her grandmother's younger sister, a 60-year-old woman who had always been more liberal than Grandma Betty. When Amber arrived, she found her preparing herbal tea on the stove, her face marked by worry. "Sit down," said Martha, serving the tea in delicate porcelain cups. "Your grandmother made me promise never to tell you this, but after she died, I knew one day you would come looking for answers." Amber drank the tea slowly. It tasted of herbs and honey, a flavor that awakened vague memories from her childhood. "Your mother wasn't like us," Martha began. "Fiona was found as a baby at the door of an orphanage in Seattle. No documents, no explanation, just a note saying she had sacred blood and should be protected. The nun who found her was your grandmother's cousin. That's why Fiona came to Chicago." Amber felt a chill down her spine. Sacred blood? Fiona grew up normal until she turned 19. Then the visions began, the dreams, the ability to feel things that others couldn't feel, plants that whispered to her, animals that followed her. Your grandmother was terrified, thought it was the devil's work. And then she met Alexander Blackwood? Martha nodded. He appeared out of nowhere, as if he knew exactly where to find her. He said he understood what was happening to her, that he could help her control the gifts. Fiona fell deeply in love. But there was a problem. What? She was already pregnant with you. The father was a college boy, nothing serious. But when Alexander found out, he said it didn't matter. That you also had the special blood, that you would be even more powerful than your mother. Amber swallowed hard. So Ethan was right. Alexander wasn't my biological father. No, but he treated you like a daughter. Fiona worked for him for 2 years, traveling to the Amazon, participating in rituals that I never fully understood. She came back different from each trip, wilder, more intense. And you were changing too. How so? Martha got up and went to an old cabinet. From there she took out a small box, which she opened carefully. Inside were photos of Amber as a child that she had never seen. In the photos, Amber was around 5 years old, but she looked different from the reserved child she remembered being. Her eyes shone with an almost adult intensity, and there was something wild in her posture. In one of the photos, she was surrounded by blue butterflies, with her hands extended as if she were talking to them. "You began to exhibit the same gifts as your mother very early," explained Martha. "You talked to plants, predicted the weather, knew when someone was lying." Fiona was torn between pride and fear. And then she ran away. One night, Fiona showed up here desperate. She said Alexander wanted to perform a ritual with you, something that would permanently seal your connection to the Blackwood lineage. She was terrified, said she didn't want you to grow up being anyone's property. Amber felt tears burning her eyes. "She was protecting me." "Yes, she took you and disappeared that same night, but before—" Martha hesitated, looking nervously at the window. "Before she did something I never fully understood. She performed a ritual with you." "What kind of ritual?" "Something to put your gifts to sleep. She said it was temporary, that when you grew up and were ready they would naturally return, but until then you would be safe." Amber remembered the feeling of something being torn from her neck, the scar she had never explained. "The necklace," she murmured. "You remember?" "Vaguely. Ethan told me about a sacred necklace that my mother took." Martha nodded, gravely. "The necklace was yours, Amber, a gift from Alexander when you were born. Fiona removed it from you the night she fled, saying that as long as you didn't wear it again, you would remain dormant." Amber felt as if all the pieces of a complex puzzle were finally falling into place. "And now, I'm working for Alexander's son, feeling exactly the same things my mother felt. Are the gifts coming back?" "From what you've told me, yes." "And Amber," Martha held her hands, "you need to be careful. Fiona never came back. To this day we don't know if she died or just disappeared, but I know she would never have abandoned you willingly." Amber stood up, feeling a new determination growing inside her. "I need to find out what happened to her, and I need to fully understand what's happening to me." "And Ethan Blackwood? Do you feel for him what Fiona felt for Alexander?" The question hit Amber like a punch to the stomach, because the answer was more complex than she would like to admit. "I feel something I've never felt for anyone," she admitted, "but I don't know if it's real or if it's part of all this ancestral connection." "There's only one way to find out," said Martha softly. "You need to go all the way. Find the necklace, fully understand your gifts, discover the truth about your mother. But Amber," she held her niece's face between her hands, "promise me you won't let yourself be used. You are no one's property, not even the Blackwoods." Amber nodded, but deep down, she knew things weren't that simple, because the more she discovered about her nature, the more she felt she belonged to something greater than herself. And the more time she spent near Ethan, the harder it became to distinguish between genuine desire and ancestral destiny. When she returned home that afternoon, she found a surprise waiting for her. On the doorstep was a small carved wooden box with no sender. Inside, wrapped in silk fabric, was a golden feather that shone as if it had its own light. And Amber knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that Ethan had begun to court her in the only way he knew how, following traditions that were older than civilization itself. The golden feather burned in Amber's palm like a live coal. She held it against the light of her bedroom lamp, observing how it shone with its own luminosity, almost hypnotic. Since she had found it, she felt a strange energy running through her body, an electric current that started from her fingers and spread to her bones. It was Monday morning when she arrived at the office, determined to confront Ethan about the gift. But as she entered the room, she found him on the phone, speaking in a language she didn't recognize, but somehow understood. He was discussing preparations for the full moon and the need to accelerate the awakening. Amber felt her blood freeze. When Ethan hung up and turned to her, his golden eyes shone in a way she had never seen before, more intense, almost animalistic. "The feather reached you," he said, as if he knew exactly what she was carrying in her purse. You can't keep sending gifts to my home, retorted Amber, trying to sound firm. And you can't keep manipulating situations. I'm not my mother, Ethan. No, agreed Ethan, slowly approaching. So you are much more powerful than she ever was, and much more stubborn. Amber felt her body react to his proximity, a wave of heat that rose from her abdomen and radiated through her skin. It was as if the feather in her purse was amplifying every sensation, every emotion. Stop, she whispered, but even she didn't know if she was asking him to stop approaching or to stop resisting what she felt. Ethan stopped a few inches from her, so close that Amber could see the small ritual scars that decorated his neck, smell his wild perfume, mixed with something that smelled of wet earth and spices. You feel it, don't you? He murmured, his voice low and husky. The connection. It's getting stronger every day. Amber couldn't deny it. Since she had discovered the truth about her family, about her dormant gifts, she felt as if she were waking from a deep sleep. And Ethan was at the center of this awakening. When he was close, she felt more alive, more connected, more herself. This isn't love, said Amber, trying to convince herself. It's ancestral manipulation. It's forced destiny. Maybe, admitted Ethan, surprising her. But does that make sight any less real? What do you feel when you look at me, Amber, when you dream of me? Does that feel forced to you? The question hit her like lightning. Because the truth was that, even knowing the whole story, even understanding the ritual implications, she still felt irresistibly attracted to Ethan. Not just physically, although the physical attraction was intense enough to keep her awake, every night, but emotionally, spiritually. I don't know what's real, she admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. Ethan raised his hand, almost touching her face, but stopped millimeters from her skin. Amber felt the heat radiating from his fingers, as if he were actually touching her. Then find out, he said simply. Come with me to the family property. That's where you'll find the answers you're looking for. What property? We have an estate in Vermont. That's where the family's oldest archives are kept, where your mother's memories are stored. And that's where my father is buried. Amber felt a chill. Alexander died 3 years ago. After you started appearing in my dreams. Ethan lowered his hand, but remained too close. He said he knew you would come back, that it was inevitable. The afternoon passed in a blur of reports and phone calls, but Amber couldn't concentrate on anything beyond Ethan's proposal. A part of her, the rational part, educated by Grandma Betty, screamed to refuse, to leave the company and never look back. But another part, deeper and more primitive, yearned for answers, to finally understand who she really was. At 6 in the evening, when the office emptied, Amber was still there, organizing papers that didn't need to be organized. Ethan appeared at the door of her office, already wearing a dark leather jacket that made him look even more dangerous. Have you decided? He asked. Amber looked out the window. Chicago stretched out below, a concrete jungle where she had spent her entire life trying to be invisible. Suddenly that city seemed like a prison. If I go, she said slowly, I want guarantees. Anything you want. I want you to promise me that you won't try to force me to participate in any ritual. I want to go as your employee, nothing more. Ethan smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You have my word. And I want to be able to return whenever I want. Of course. Amber sighed, knowing she was making a decision that would change everything. When do we leave? Tomorrow morning. I'll pick you up at 6. That night, Amber packed with trembling hands. She put the golden feather in a small box, along with her few pieces of jewelry, not quite understanding why she felt it was important. To take it. When she finally lay down, she dreamed again of the forest, but this time the dream was different. She was in a circular clearing, surrounded by immense trees that seemed to whisper ancient secrets. In the center of the clearing was a bonfire, and around it women danced wearing only golden necklaces and tribal paintings on their skin. Amber recognized herself among them, not as she was now, but as she could be. Wild, powerful, free. And, on the other side of the bonfire, watching her with eyes that shone like those of a feline, was Ethan. But not the Ethan in suit and tie that she knew. This Ethan had a bare chest marked by ritual scars, his hair loose falling over his shoulders, and a predatory intensity that made her tremble with desire and fear. In the dream, she walked to him through the flames, without burning. When they finally touched, Amber felt as if she were connecting not just with Ethan, but with something much larger, an ancestral force that pulsed in the earth, in the trees, in the stars. She woke up breathless, with her body on fire, and a disturbing certainty she was in love with Ethan Blackwood, not with the civilized version of him, but with the wild man she had seen in the dream, and that terrified her more than any ritual or family tradition, because she knew, deep in her soul, that when they reached the family property, there would be no turning back. Whatever happened there would forever change who she was, and for the first time in her life, Amber wasn't sure if she wanted to resist the change. At 5:30 in the morning, she was at the window watching the empty streets, waiting. When Ethan's black car stopped in front of the building, Amber took her suitcase and went down. She didn't look back. She knew if she did, she would lose courage. Ethan was waiting for her, leaning against the car, wearing dark jeans and a white shirt that highlighted his tanned skin. When he smiled at her, Amber felt her heart race. "Ready to discover who you really are?" he asked, opening the passenger door. "No," Amber answered honestly, "but I'm going anyway." And for the first time since they met, Ethan laughed, a low and genuine sound that made her realize that perhaps he too was afraid of what they would find. The trip to Vermont lasted 6 hours, but to Amber it seemed like an eternity. Ethan drove in silence, with a concentrated expression that she couldn't decipher. The sound of the engine and the low music on the radio created a forced intimacy that made her nervous and excited at the same time. Every time he changed gears, his fingers passed dangerously close to her leg. As they moved away from Chicago, Amber felt as if she were leaving behind not just the city, but a version of herself. The air became cleaner, the sky bluer, and something inside her began to pulse, with more intensity. The golden feather in her purse seemed to heat up with each mile traveled. "Can you feel it?" asked Ethan, breaking the silence for the first time in hours. "Feel what?" "The earth. It's calling you back." Amber wanted to deny it, but it was useless. There was something in the landscape that awakened memories she didn't know she possessed. When they passed through an area of dense forest, she felt an almost irresistible impulse to ask him to stop the car and run among the trees. "Did my mother feel this too?" "Fiona used to say it was like coming home after a long journey," replied Ethan, with a note of melancholy in his voice. "She cried every time she had to return to Chicago." They arrived at the property in the late afternoon. Amber expected to find a common farm, but what she saw left her breathless. The main house was an immense colonial construction, with stone walls covered with vines and verandas that extended across the entire facade. But it wasn't the architecture that impressed her. It was the feeling of recognition that hit her like a wave. "I've been here before," she murmured, getting out of the car with trembling legs. "When you were 5 years old," confirmed Ethan. "Fiona brought you for a summer solstice celebration. Don't you remember?" Amber closed her eyes and let the memories return. Fragmented recollections began to form. She running through the gardens, laughing while colorful butterflies danced around her, the sound of drums echoing through the night, the smell of bonfire and burning herbs. "There were other children," she said slowly, "girls like me, daughters of other chosen women. Some still live on the property." Amber opened her eyes, surprised. "They live here?" "The Blackwood family has always taken care of those who are part of the lineage," explained Ethan, picking up the suitcases. "Some choose to stay, others leave to live their own lives, but all are welcome here." They walked through the garden toward the main house. Amber noticed that there were people working among the plants, men and women of different ages, all with an aura of serenity that she had rarely seen in the city. Some greeted her as if they had known her for years. "Amber," a female voice called. "Her?" A woman of about 30 was approaching, running, with curly hair, held by a colorful ribbon and a radiant smile. There was something familiar about her face. "You don't remember me, do you?" said the woman, stopping in front of them. "I'm Ivy. We used to play together as children." The memories came back in a flash. A girl with curly hair who knew how to talk to the fish in the lake, who laughed like a bell, and who had cried when Amber left. "Ivy," Amber whispered, feeling tears burning her eyes. "You stayed?" "I never managed to leave," admitted Ivy with a nostalgic smile. "This place calls me back whenever I try, but I'm happy here. I work with medicinal plants, help with the ceremonies. It's a good life." Ethan left the two of them talking and took the suitcases inside the house. Amber watched him climb the porch stairs, involuntarily admiring the way his jeans marked his long legs. "He's changed a lot since you appeared," commented Ivy, following her gaze. "How so?" "Ethan has always been intense, but since the dreams about you began, he became different, more human in a way. Before, he seemed more machine than man." Amber felt a pang of something that might be jealousy. Did you ever have something?" Ivy laughed, a crystalline sound. "We all kind of grew up together here. There was a time when I thought, maybe fun, but no. Ethan had always been waiting for someone specific, and now we know who it was." That night, during dinner in the main hall, a huge table that seated about 20 people, Amber felt as if she had entered a dream. The food was prepared with spices she didn't know but that her body recognized, and the conversation flowed in a mixture of English, Spanish, and words in indigenous languages that she surprisingly understood. Ethan sat beside her, and Amber was hyper-aware of his every movement. When their fingers accidentally touched as they reached for the same dish, she felt an electric current run up her arm. "Tomorrow I'll show you the library," he said softly, just for her to hear. "There are my father's personal diaries about your mother." "And the rituals?" asked Amber, trying to sound casual. "When do they happen?" "At the full moon. 3 days from now." Ethan looked at her intensely. "But you don't have to participate if you don't want to." "And if I want to?" The question came out before Amber could think. Ethan remained motionless, the fork suspended in the air, his golden eyes shining in the candlelight. "Then it will be your choice," he finally said. "But Amber, once you participate in a full moon ritual, there's no going back. You will fully awaken, and that changes everything." "How?" "You will become what you were always destined to be. Powerful, free, connected to ancestral forces, but also," he hesitated, running his hand through his hair, "you will also become mine, just as I will become yours. It's a bond that transcends the physical." Amber felt her entire body shiver. The idea should have terrified her, but instead it awakened a deep and primitive desire. "And if I don't participate? Then you will remain as you are now, half asleep, half awake, free to choose your own life, but never really complete." After dinner, Ethan took her for a walk through the gardens. The property was much larger than Amber had imagined, with trails that got lost in the dense forest and smaller buildings scattered throughout the land. There was a colonial chapel, a laboratory where Ivy and other women prepared natural remedies, and at the center of everything, a stone amphitheater that seemed much older than the rest. "That's where the rituals take place," explained Ethan, stopping at the edge of the amphitheater. Amber descended a few stone steps, feeling a strange energy emanating from the place. In the center was a circle of smaller stones, and she could swear she saw a faint light pulsing between them. What exactly happens in a full moon ritual? Ethan came down behind her, stopping so close that Amber could feel the heat from his body. Each ritual is different, but basically it's a celebration of the connection between worlds. The women dance, sing in ancestral languages, enter into communion with nature, and at the height of the ceremony... He stopped. At the height of the ceremony, what? For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He walked to the window, observing the city. Below, when he turned again, there was a vulnerability in his eyes that surprised her. The chosen woman unites with the man of the Blackwood lineage. Not just physically, but spiritually. Their energies merge, creating a bridge between two worlds, the rational and the mystical. Amber turned to face him. They were alone in the amphitheater, under a starry sky that seemed brighter than it should. "And you want me to be that woman?" "I want you to be mine," said Ethan, his voice hoarse with desire. "Not by tradition, not by destiny. Because when I look at you, I feel as if I found the half of my soul that I didn't know was lost." Amber felt her defenses crumbling one by one. "Ethan." He moved even closer, raising his hand to touch her face. This time, he didn't stop. His fingers traced the line of her jaw with a delicacy that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. "You don't have to decide now," he murmured. "But Amber, if you decide to stay, if you decide to participate in the ritual, know that it will be because you chose to, because you want me as much as I want you." Amber closed her eyes, losing herself in the sensation of his touch. For the first time in her life, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to completely surrender to someone. What it would be like to love without reservations, without fear, without the limitations she had built over the years. When she opened her eyes, Ethan was watching her with an expression that mixed hope and vulnerability. "Kiss me," she whispered, surprising them both, and he did. Ethan's kiss wasn't gentle. It was wild, desperate, as if he had been containing years of desire in a single explosion. Amber felt her legs weaken when his lips found hers, hot and demanding. There was something primitive in the way he kissed her, as if he were a predator, finally claiming his prey. But Amber didn't feel like prey. For the first time in her life, she felt powerful. Her hands moved up Ethan's chest, feeling the tense muscles beneath his shirt, and when he moaned softly against her lips, she knew she had as much power over him as he had over her. When they separated, both were breathless. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if he were fighting against a deep instinct. "Amber," he murmured, his voice hoarse, "if we continue like this—" "I know," she said, but didn't move away. Instead, she let her fingers trace the scars on his neck. "These marks, what do they mean?" Ethan shuddered under her touch. "They are symbols of protection. I received them when I turned 18 in my first rite of passage." "Did it hurt?" "Not as much as living without you all these years." The answer should have sounded exaggerated, but Amber felt it as absolute truth, because she too had felt something missing in her life, a void that she had never known how to fill. They walked back to the house in silence, but it was a silence loaded with unspoken promises. When they reached the porch, Ethan stopped. "Your mother used to stay in the tower room," he said, pointing to an illuminated window on the 3rd floor. "I prepared the same room for you." Amber followed his gaze and felt a shiver. There was something about the window of that room that called to her, as if a part of her already knew she belonged to that place. The room was exactly as she had imagined, though she had never been there before. Stone walls covered with colorful tapestries, a bed with a dark wood canopy, and large windows offering a view of the entire property. But what impressed her most was the feeling of familiarity, as if she were returning home after a long absence. On the dresser was a photo that made her pause to breathe. Fiona, in her early 20s, was sitting on the same bed where Amber would sleep, with a radiant smile and her hair loose falling over her shoulders. In her arms she held a child of about 2 years old, whom Amber recognized as herself. "She was happy here," said Ethan, appearing at the door. "Happier than I ever saw her anywhere else." "Then why did she run away?" Ethan entered the room and walked to the window. "Fear. Fear that you would grow up without choice, that you would be forced to follow the same path she did. And you? Did you have a choice?" "No," he admitted. "I was born knowing that one day I would find my spiritual companion. I was raised for it. But Amber," he turned to face her, "from the first dream of you I knew it would be different, that you wouldn't just be my companion, but my equal." "My other half?" Amber approached him slowly. "And if I'm not? And if all this is just illusion, conditioning, forced destiny?" "Then we'll find out together," said Ethan, extending his hand to her. "But first, there's something you need to see." He led her to a secret door behind a bookshelf. Behind it, a spiral staircase descended to what appeared to be a basement. But when they got down there, Amber discovered it was much more than that. It was an underground library, with walls covered with ancient books and scrolls. In the center was a circular table where documents were scattered, and attached to the walls were dozens of photos of women whom Amber recognized as being from the same lineage as her. "Here are recorded centuries of history," explained Ethan, "including everything about your mother." Amber approached the table and saw that the documents were detailed reports about Fiona. There were descriptions of her gifts, of her reactions to the rituals, even transcripts of conversations she had with Alexander. "You documented everything," murmured Amber, feeling invaded. "It was necessary. Each woman of the lineage is unique, with specific abilities. Fiona had a special connection with medicinal plants and wild animals. She could heal with a touch, make flowers bloom out of season." Amber leafed through the reports, absorbing information about a mother she had never really known. On one of the pages, she found something that made her stop. Fiona Collins shows increasing resistance to the preparatory rituals, expresses concern about the future of her daughter Amber, born outside the traditional ritual but showing signs of gifts, even more powerful than her mother's. "What signs?" asked Amber. Ethan approached and read over her shoulder. "At 3 years old, you made an entire garden bloom in the middle of winter. At 4, you talked to animals that others couldn't see. At 5, during your only visit here, you predicted a storm 3 days before it happened." Amber didn't remember any of this, but something inside her recognized the descriptions as truth. "And my mother got scared. Fiona realized that you would be much more powerful than any previous woman of the lineage, and such power, without control, without guidance, could be dangerous." "Dangerous how?" Ethan hesitated. "There are stories of women of the lineage who went mad with the weight of their gifts, who got lost between worlds and never came back. Fiona wanted to protect you from that." Amber closed the report, feeling a weight in her chest. "And now, if I fully awaken, do I run the same risk?" "No," said Ethan firmly, "because now you have something that the others didn't have. You have choice, and you have someone who can anchor you in the real world." "You?" "If you allow me." Amber stared at him, seeing genuine vulnerability in his golden eyes. "Ethan, I need to know about what you feel for me. Is it real? Or is it just the fulfillment of an ancestral destiny?" He approached, taking her hands in his. "Want to know the truth? I spent my whole life preparing to meet my spiritual companion. I studied the rituals, understood my role, accepted my destiny. But when you walked into my office, all of that became irrelevant." "Why?" "Because for the first time in my life, I didn't care about traditions or destiny. I just wanted to know you. The real woman, not the mythical figure from my dreams. And Amber," he squeezed her hands, "the real woman is much more fascinating than any ancestral fantasy." Amber felt tears burning her eyes. "I'm afraid." "Afraid? Of what?" "Of losing myself, of becoming something I don't recognize, of loving you so much that I cease to exist as an individual." Ethan released her hands and held her face gently. "Then don't participate in the ritual. Stay with me as Amber Collins, independent and strong woman. We'll build our own story, away from traditions and destinies." "You would do that? You would give up centuries of family tradition for my sake?" "I would give up everything," he said simply. "Because what I feel for you has nothing to do with rituals or lineages. It has to do with the fact that you make me want to be a better man." Amber leaned in and kissed him again, but this time the kiss was soft, full of promises and possibilities. When they separated, she knew what she had to do. "I want to participate in the ritual," she said, surprising them both. "Amber, not for tradition, not for destiny, but because I want to discover who I really am, and I want to do it by your side." Ethan wrapped her in his arms, and Amber felt as if she had finally found her place in the world. In 2 days, it would be the full moon, and she would be ready. The 2 days leading up to the full moon passed like an intense dream. Amber felt her body changing, as if every cell were awakening to a new reality. Colors seemed more vivid, sounds clearer, and she began to hear whispers in the wind that spoke in a language her heart perfectly understood. Ethan accompanied her around the property, introducing her to the secrets she had forgotten. He showed her how to talk to the plants in Ivy's laboratory, how to feel the energy that pulsed in the ancient stones of the amphitheater, how to interpret the signs that wild animals left on the forest trails. "It's happening very fast," observed Ivy, on the morning of the ritual, as she helped Amber prepare the herbs she would use in the ceremony. "Normally the awakening takes months, but it's as if you were just remembering something you always knew." Amber nodded, feeling the golden feather pulse in the pocket of her skirt. Since she had arrived at the property, the object seemed to have a life of its own, heating up whenever she approached something significant. "Ivy," said Amber hesitantly. "What exactly happens during the ritual?" Ethan explained roughly. "But each ritual is unique," replied Ivy, grinding dried leaves in a stone mortar. "But there are common elements. The women dance until they enter a trance, connecting with ancestral energies. The full moon amplifies our connection to the spiritual world, and when the energy reaches its peak, the chosen woman unites with the man of the lineage," completed Amber. "Not just physically," clarified Ivy. "It's a fusion of souls, Amber. You become two aspects of the same energy. That's why there's no going back. Once connected in this way, you will be linked forever." Amber felt a shiver of anticipation mixed with fear. "And if something goes wrong?" "Nothing will go wrong," said a voice behind them. They turned to see an elderly woman approaching. She was short, with grey hair tied in braids, and eyes that shone with ancestral wisdom. Amber recognized her immediately, though she didn't. "I know from where." "You're Yvonne," said Amber, the words coming out before she could think. "The head healer," the woman smiled. "Finally you're remembering. I brought you into the world, Amber. I was present at your birth, and your mother entrusted me with your protection before she fled." "You've been protecting me all these years?" "From a distance, making sure nothing bad happened while your gifts were dormant, but now—" She held Amber's hands, and immediately a wave of heat and energy ran through the young woman's body. "Now you're ready to take on your true power." The rest of the day passed in a ritual preparation that Amber felt in her bones as something familiar. Yvonne helped her prepare her body with aromatic oils, painted symbols on her skin with a golden paint that seemed to shine, and combed her hair with flowers harvested on the new moon. When the sun set, Amber was in the tower room, wearing only a flowing white dress that Yvonne had made especially for her. The golden feather was now attached to her hair as an ornament, pulsing with its own light. "It's time," announced Ivy, appearing at the door. Amber descended the stairs with trembling legs. On the porch, the women of the property were gathered, about 15 in all, of different ages, all wearing white dresses similar to hers and carrying lit torches. When they saw her, they began to sing in a language she didn't know, but that resonated in her soul. "Where is Ethan?" asked Amber. "He's already at the amphitheater," replied Yvonne, preparing in his own way. The procession walked through the property by torchlight. The full moon shone intensely in the sky, so large and bright that it seemed possible to touch it. Amber felt a growing energy rising from the earth through her bare feet, as if nature itself were awakening for the ceremony. When they reached the amphitheater, Amber stopped at the edge, observing the scene below. The circle of stones was illuminated by dozens of candles, creating a magical and primitive atmosphere. Men from the property played drums in a rhythm that seemed synchronized with the beats of Amber's heart. And in the center of the circle, waiting for her, was Ethan. But it wasn't the suited Ethan she had met in the office, not even the casual Ethan of the last few days. This Ethan had a bare chest marked by tribal paintings that mirrored the scars on his neck. His hair was loose, falling over his shoulders, and there was a wild intensity in his eyes that made her tremble with desire. "Go," whispered Yvonne. "It's your time." Amber descended the stone steps slowly, hypnotized by the sound of the drums and Ethan's golden eyes. The other women followed her, forming a circle around the circle of stones. When Amber reached the center, Ethan extended his hand to her. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice almost inaudible over the sound of the drums. "I am," replied Amber, placing her hand in his. The touch was like lightning. Pure energy ran through both their bodies, and Amber felt as if she could see through Ethan's eyes, feel what he felt, know his most intimate thoughts. And she knew he was experiencing the same connection with her. The women began to dance around them, their voices rising in a chant that seemed to come from remote times. Amber felt her body moving to the same rhythm, as if she knew exactly what to do. Her conscious mind dissolved, being replaced by something more primitive and powerful. She danced as she had never danced in her life, her body moving with a feline grace she didn't know she possessed. The white dress floated around her like smoke, and the golden feather in her hair shone like a star. Ethan danced before her, his masculine and predatory movements perfectly complementing hers. It was as if they were two parts of a cosmic dance, two halves meeting after millennia of separation. The energy in the amphitheater grew with each minute. The candles seemed to burn brighter, the drums sounded more intense, and Amber felt as if she were dissolving into a force greater than herself. It was then that she saw, not with her physical eyes, but with an inner vision that opened like a flower, generations of women before her, all dancing the same ritual, all connecting with men of the Blackwood lineage. She saw her mother young, dancing with Alexander on a similar night. She saw Fiona's grandmother and the grandmother's grandmother in an unbroken chain that extended for centuries. And she understood that it wasn't just about her and Ethan. It was about keeping alive an ancestral connection, a bridge between two worlds that modern times had almost destroyed. "Amber," Ethan's voice cut through her visions. She opened her eyes and found him close, so close that she could see her own reflection in his golden irises. Around them, the other women had stopped dancing and formed a silent circle. The drums had diminished to a soft, almost hypnotic rhythm. "It's now," he whispered. Amber nodded, instinctively knowing what came next. It wasn't just physical attraction, although her entire body was on fire with desire. It was a spiritual need, a hunger of the soul that could only be satisfied through complete union with him. When Ethan kissed her this time, Amber felt the world explode in a myriad of colors and sensations. It wasn't just their lips meeting, it was their souls recognizing each other, merging, becoming a single energy. And for the first time in her life, Amber Collins felt complete. Amber awoke at dawn on a bed of wildflowers, with her body still, vibrating with ancestral energy. Beside her, Ethan slept deeply, his breathing calm and regular. She observed his relaxed face, the ritual scars on his neck, the way the golden morning light caressed his tanned skin. Everything about him seemed familiar to her now, as if she had known him for decades. The previous night had been more intense than anything she could have imagined. It hadn't been just a physical union, although the desire between them had been consummated with a passion that still made her blush. It had been a complete fusion, spiritual and emotional, that had left her transformed in ways she was still discovering. Amber got up slowly, covering her naked body with the wrinkled white dress. Her hair was loose and wild, still ornamented, with flowers from the ritual. She walked to the edge of the amphitheater and looked at the property extending below, bathed in the soft light of dawn. She felt different, more powerful, more connected, more alive. She could hear the plants whispering in the wind, feel the energy pulsing in the earth beneath her feet, sense the presence of every living being within a radius of miles. It was as if she had awakened from a deep sleep that had lasted 26 years. "How do you feel?" Ethan's voice made her turn. He had woken up, hand was approaching, still shirtless, his hair disheveled. There was a new mark on his chest, a golden symbol that she didn't remember seeing before, as if it had appeared during the ritual. "Different," replied Amber honestly. "As if I were another person." Ethan wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're the same Amber," he murmured, "just more complete." She nestled against his chest, feeling the familiar warmth that she now recognized as her anchor in the physical world. And now? What happens after a ritual like this? "Now you are officially united," said a familiar voice. They turned to see Yvonne climbing the steps of the amphitheater, carrying a tray with fresh fruits and tea. The healer was smiling, but Amber noticed a shadow of concern in her eyes. "Is something wrong?" asked Amber, accepting a cup of tea that smelled of herbs and honey. "Not wrong," said Yvonne carefully, "but unexpected. Yesterday's ritual was different from all the ones I've witnessed." "Different how?" Ethan asked, furrowing his brow. "The energy was much more intense. The connection between you transcended what normally happens, and Amber—" She looked directly at her. "You awakened gifts that we didn't even know you possessed." As if to confirm Yvonne's words, a blue butterfly landed on Amber's extended hand, then another and another. In a few minutes she was surrounded by a swarm of colorful butterflies that danced around her as if obeying a silent command. "That's new," murmured Ethan, impressed. Amber concentrated and the butterflies gracefully moved away, disappearing among the trees. "I could feel what they felt," she said, amazed, "as if they were talking to me." "Your mother never had this level of connection with nature," observed Yvonne. "You may be the most powerful of the lineage in centuries." It should have been good news, but something in Yvonne's tone left Amber uneasy. "Is that a problem?" "It could be. Power like this draws attention. And there are people who don't want our lineage to strengthen." "What kind of people?" asked Ethan, his voice becoming hard. Yvonne hesitated, exchanging a significant look with him. "Perhaps it's better to return to the house. There are things Amber needs to know before it's too late." The way back was tense. Amber felt that something important was being left out, but whenever she tried to ask, Yvonne changed the subject. It was only when they reached the underground library that she finally got answers. "Sit down," said Yvonne, indicating one of the old chairs. "What I'm going to tell you may shock you." Amber obeyed, with Ethan positioning himself protectively behind her. "Is it about my mother?" "In part. Amber, your mother didn't disappear voluntarily. She was kidnapped." Amber's world stopped. "What?" "There's an organization, a group of people who oppose what our family represents. They believe that the connection between the rational world and the mystical is dangerous, that it should be eliminated. For decades they have persecuted women of the lineage. And they took my mother? Fiona discovered them by chance. She found documents at the company headquarters in Chicago, proof that they were infiltrated even among our employees. When she tried to tell Alexander, it was too late," completed Ethan somberly. Amber felt nausea rising in her throat. "Is she dead?" "We don't know," admitted Yvonne. "We never found the body. But Amber, last night, when you fully awakened, they felt it. Power like yours can't be hidden. Are you saying I'm in danger?" "We're all in danger," said a voice at the entrance to the library. Amber turned to see Gabriel, a man of about 40 whom she had briefly met at dinner 2 days before. He looked agitated, with wrinkled clothes, as if he had traveled all night. "Gabriel," said Ethan, tense, "what are you doing here?" "I came to warn you, they're coming." "Who's coming?" asked Amber, although deep down she already knew the answer. "The Purifiers," said Gabriel. "That's what they call themselves. They found out about yesterday's ritual, about your awakening. A convoy of vehicles is on the way." Amber felt her blood freeze in her veins. "What do they want?" "They want you," replied Gabriel bluntly. "Your power is a threat to everything they believe in. They would rather see you dead than free." Ethan stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Over my dead body?" "That might be exactly what happens," said Gabriel. "They have no scruples, Ethan, and this time they came prepared." Amber stood up, feeling a new strength growing inside her. "How many are there?" "At least a dozen, armed and determined." "And how much time do we have?" "An hour, maybe less." Amber looked around the library at the concerned faces of Yvonne, Ethan, and Gabriel. A part of her, the old, fearful part, raised by Grandma Betty, wanted to run, to hide, to become invisible. Again. But that part no longer existed. "I won't run," she said firmly. "Not like my mother was forced to do." "Amber," Ethan held her arms, "you don't understand. These men have killed other women of the lineage. They have weapons, experience." "And I have this," Amber interrupted, extending her hand. Immediately, the plants in the library began to grow uncontrollably. Vines extended along the walls, flowers bloomed out of season, and a green, living energy filled the entire environment. "My God," whispered Gabriel. Amber smiled, but it wasn't a gentle smile. There was something fierce in it, something primitive and powerful. "They want a woman of the lineage? Then they'll find one." "What are you thinking?" asked Ethan, although from his golden eyes she could see that he already knew. "I'm thinking, it's time to show these purifiers what happens when they threaten our family." And for the first time since she had awakened, Amber Collins felt truly free. Free from containment, from fear, from the limitations she had imposed on herself for years. What came next would be dangerous, perhaps deadly, but it would be faced as herself, complete and without reservations. The war was just beginning. The battle that followed wasn't as Amber had imagined. When the purifiers finally arrived at the property, they didn't come as an organized military force, but as shadows that infiltrated the gardens in the dead of night. They were 12 men dressed in black, with silent weapons and precise movements of those who had hunted women like Amber for decades. But they weren't prepared for what they found. Amber sensed them long before they got close to the main house. The earth whispered about their approach. The nocturnal animals fled from their path, and even the wind changed direction to avoid them. She awoke Ethan with a gentle touch, already fully alert. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan got up immediately. Reaching for a ritual knife he always kept close. "How many?" 12. Spread throughout the gardens. Amber closed her eyes, connecting more deeply with the property. 4 are approaching by the main trail, 3 from the left side, 5 from the back. "How can you know this with such precision?" Amber opened her eyes, and Ethan saw that they shone with their own golden light. "Because now this land is part of me, and I am part of it." They went down silently, finding Yvonne, Ivy, and the other women already gathered in the main hall. Gabriel had left during the night to seek reinforcements, but Amber knew there wouldn't be time for external help to arrive. "The children?" asked Amber. "They're in the underground shelter," replied Yvonne. "But Amber, you need to understand. These men aren't like common criminals. They've been specifically trained to hunt our lineage. They know our weak points." "Then it's fortunate that I'm not like the women they hunted before," said Amber, walking to the window. Outside, she could see dark figures moving among the trees. There was something disturbingly methodical about their movements, as if they were following a carefully elaborated plan. "Amber," Ethan held her arm, "what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking it's time to discover what I'm really capable of." She went out the front door, walking barefoot on the grass wet with dew. Ethan followed her along with the other women, forming a semicircle behind her. The moon was still visible in the brightening sky, and Amber felt its energy pulsing in sync with her heartbeats. "Fiona Collins was your mother," a voice cut through the night. A man emerged from the shadows, tall and thin, with grey hair and cold eyes. There were scars on his hands that Amber recognized as being from ritual burns, but not like Ethan's. These were different, intended to cut spiritual connections instead of strengthening them. "You knew my mother. It wasn't a question." "I did. A beautiful, powerful woman, exactly like you." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. "She also believed she could fight against us. What did you do to her? What we'll do to you? We freed her soul from the ancestral curse she carried." Amber felt a cold anger growing in her chest. "You killed her. We saved her, as we'll save you." The other purifiers emerged from the shadows surrounding the group. Amber could feel the fear of the other women, but also their determination. They had faced this situation before, lost, loved, ones to these men. "Why?" asked Amber, genuinely curious. "Why do you hate what we are so much?" "You are an aberration," said the leader. "A distortion of the natural order. Women shouldn't have this power, this connection to primitive forces. You represent a return to times of chaos and superstition." "Or perhaps," said Amber softly, "we represent something that you fear, balance, harmony between worlds that you prefer to keep separate." The man made a signal, and Amber heard the distinctive sound of weapons being cocked. Enough talk. It was then that Amber discovered the true extent of her power. She didn't raise her hands or shout commands. She simply asked the earth, the plants, the animals, the very air. And they responded. The ground under the purifier's feet began to tremble. Vines sprouted from nowhere, wrapping around their legs and arms. Swarms of insects emerged from the trees, covering their faces and forcing them to drop their weapons. The wind intensified, carrying pollens that made them sneeze and cry uncontrollably. But the most impressive was when the animals came. First came the birds, hundreds of them, of all species, creating a dark cloud in the sky that blocked the moon. Then came the mammals, rabbits, deer, even some mountain lions that Amber knew lived in the nearby reserve. All positioned themselves around her and the other women like a protective army. The purifiers tried to fight, but it was like trying to battle against nature itself. Their weapons were useless against swarms. Their combat techniques didn't work when they couldn't see or breathe properly. One by one, they fell unconscious, defeated not by violence, but by the very force of life they had tried to destroy. When silence finally returned, Amber turned to the leader, who had remained conscious through sheer willpower. "Where is my mother?" she asked. "Dead," he spat, "for 20 years. "Lie." Amber approached, and he tried to back away, but the vines kept him in place. "I would. Feel if she were dead. Where is she?" The man stared at her with hatred, but also with something that seemed to be fear. "Even if I knew, I would never tell you." Amber placed her hand on his forehead, and immediately images began to flow. Between them, she saw her mother being taken, not killed, but imprisoned. She saw an underground complex where other women of the lineage were kept, their spiritual connections suppressed by drugs and blocking rituals. "She's alive," whispered Amber, tears running down her face. "You've kept her prisoner for 20 years. What did you see?" asked Ethan, approaching. "I saw where they are, my mother and other women. They're being kept in an underground facility in Montana." Amber turned to the other women, feeling an iron determination growing in her chest. "We're going to get them. All of them." "Amber," said Yvonne cautiously, "it could be a trap." "Maybe," agreed Amber, "but it doesn't matter. For 20 years my mother believed I was safe, that her sacrifice had been worth it. Now it's my turn to save her." In the months that followed, Amber organized not just a rescue, but a revolution. Using the information extracted from the purifiers, mind and her growing network of awakened women, she located and freed dozens of prisoners. Each rescue strengthened her connection with other spiritual lineages, creating a protection network that extended throughout the country. The reunion with Fiona was everything Amber had dreamed of and more. Her mother, although physically debilitated by years of imprisonment, maintained intact the spirit that Amber had inherited. When they embraced for the first time in 2 decades, Amber felt as if a part of her soul that had always been fragmented finally became complete. "You've become much more powerful than I ever imagined," said Fiona, holding her daughter's face between her hands. "And you've chosen a good companion." Amber looked at Ethan, who had remained by her side throughout the entire rescue journey. "Yes, I have." "Not by destiny," he added, approaching, "but by genuine love." The wedding ceremony took place in the same amphitheater where Amber had awakened to her true power. But this time it wasn't an ancestral ritual dictated by tradition. It was a celebration of choice, of love built on freedom and mutual respect. Fiona officiated the ceremony, with Yvonne at her side. Ivy and Gabriel, who had become more than an ally during the rescues, served as witnesses, and all the women whom Amber had helped to free were present, creating a circle of sisterhood that transcended lineages and traditions. "You choose to stay together, not because destiny forced you," said Fiona, "but because you chose to build something new. A love that honors the past but is not prisoner to it." Amber looked into Ethan's golden eyes and saw not just the man who had awakened her power, but the one who had respected her freedom of choice. She saw a future where they would work together to protect other women, where they would raise children who would grow up knowing that power and freedom could coexist. "I choose you," said Amber, "not because I am destined for you, but because you chose me too, because our love is built on equality, respect, and freedom." "I choose you," replied Ethan, "because you taught me that tradition without choice is prison, but tradition with freedom is legacy, because with you I am stronger, more human, more myself." When they kissed, sealing not just their union but also a new chapter for their lineages, Amber felt that she had finally found her place in the world, not as the offering of an ancestral ritual, but as a powerful woman who had chosen to love and be loved. Years later, when she told her story to the daughters they had, twins who were born with golden eyes and a special glow in their skin, Amber always ended the same way. True love isn't destiny. It's choice. And the most powerful choice we can make is to love someone completely while maintaining our own completeness. And so Amber Collins, who had begun as a contained and fearful woman, became not just a powerful sorceress, but a revolutionary of love. She proved that ancestral passion and modern freedom could coexist, that female power didn't need to be feared, but celebrated.